なりおしまい。
Welcome back to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball as usual, and in particular, Dragon Ball episode 78, which is kind of the end of the arc here for Goku's first arc. I don't know. What do you want to say on that?
Yeah, I would say it's
Yeah.
Goku's first arc as a protagonist. So
Goku's first arc. There we go. It's like it's the end of that. It's the falling action to that, I would say.
right.
But we'll get into that as we get into the episode. We're glad to be back. Before we get started, a couple things that we always like to say. Please give us a like if you like what you hear. Subscribe. We upload new episodes on Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube and Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Give us a subscribe over there and, give comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say, whether you agree or disagree. I know that a lot of you out there are interested in the mythology behind Dragon Ball. So, I mean, the impetus behind doing this whole show was so that we could reach out and possibly gain even further insight into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great time to talk about it. Elden Ring's out recently. I feel like more people are interested in mythology. And so if anyone sees something interesting about that, and they feel like, oh, that seems like that's a good thing, but I don't know why it's good in the story where it is. That's sort of the insight that we're trying to look at and figure out about. It's like dissecting the series, right? So
Mhm.
people who like to dissect the Souls genre, you kind of feel like it appeals, right?
It's in the same spirit, I would say.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's a good jumping off point into the episode, which is called The Eternal Dragon Rises. So, the first thing we see is Goku returning with the first Dragon Ball. Krillin asks Goku where he found his change of clothes, and Goku just laughs in response and doesn't tell him. And when Yamcha asks who was it that had the Dragon Ball in the car, Goku says they can talk about it later, but they never talk
do.
about it later. Goku then tells Upa that he should hurry to the land of Korin to revive his father, and Roshi reminds Upa to respect and revere his father. Now, a couple things I want to mention there. Goku acknowledging that it's almost Goku acknowledging that it's not only is it not important, but that Krillin and Yamcha wouldn't understand even if they could.
Right. It's it's speaking to that archetype. It's speaking to that aspect of humanity, right? And that's sort of what Upa I think is supposed to represent ultimately in his character is he's sort of this pure good um untainted by civilization type potentiality, right? And so with that being an aspect of how Upa is, that's what Roshi's speaking to, right, when he says that. He's saying that is ultimately something that he has to retain. That's his wisdom that he imparts, right?
Hmm. And it's not, let's say, Roshi pointing out his flaws. It's just reminding Upa what got him here to begin with, I suppose. Is that reverence to his father and the relationship that he had is what inspired Goku to take the journey to begin with.
Right, and not just to his father, but to the father, as this is something that Goku's doing for his sake,
Hmm.
and that's something that troubles him a lot, right? We see it multiple times throughout the
Yeah,
arc up
troubles Upa,
to
that
this
is.
point, yeah,
Yeah.
that it's something that's being done for him, right?
And the last thing it shows is Goku's focus because he's not ignorant. It's not ignorance that I want to say, but he ignores things that are not within his focus. And right now, he's focused on fulfilling his character arc and completing this first arc that he does. Because Goku doesn't have a flat character arc. This is definitely an arc. Um, we're gonna see how the ripple effects of this particular thing echo throughout the rest of the series, and
It's the gravity of it.
it is, and it's the basis that we need that everyone is able to kind of build upon, and what everyone, I mean, like all the other characters that come along.
Yeah, the just the way that Goku reacts to the situation where he arrives and then he doesn't want to expound on anything, right? He's saying, "We'll talk about it later. That's not important. What's important is this." And he's pointing to this aspect of himself that he's transcended into deeper wisdom of what's important, right? And so he's stepping almost into that meta level where he's seeing what is the most important thing truly. His aim is true, right? And his aim is ultimately true in this sense. And so all of it is irrelevant, so to speak.
Well, all of it, and what I want to say is Goku's interactions with Pilaf, like Goku's defeat of the foolish antagonist is nothing new. It's not important, right? It is such that it's gonna hinder his path forward, and so Goku doesn't even acknowledge it.
And I want to,
He's not caught up in the minutia.
well, also to point out what Pilaf sort of is as an instantiation. I would say he is.
Well, actually, this is something Goku doesn't understand
I
because he thinks that his interaction with Pilaf is unimportant. But that's what he's telling us
because
here,
the reason I think is that
which
Pilaf is
isn't.
this sort of representation of the inevitability of the struggle within yourself to be able to conquer your own sort of inner um, seed of malice or your seed of selfishness, right? He appeared in the story as a result of Goku having into contact with Bulma and seeing the nakedness of Bulma, and becoming aware of the other and that sort of coming into consciousness and the knowledge of good and evil, right? So he's that you could think of it as over the time has this seed of evil inside of Goku grown at all? Would it be likely to overcome him, right? To control him or to defeat his spirit, right? And hasn't gotten any bigger, right? It hasn't gotten any stronger because this is that test, right? He passed the test from the devil might beam. It was like, okay, how big is the seed of evil? Can it sprout within you? And it didn't, right? And this is sort of that representation that Pilaf is still the same. He hasn't gotten any bigger. He hasn't gotten any more wise. He hasn't gotten any more threatening. And it's a casual. It's like a
There actually
there's a
is,
formality to it. They have to
but
make a little
hold on.
shake on it, right?
I agree, and Goku not acknowledging it, not wanting to talk about it, shows how little Goku respects his interaction with Pilaf, which is
Right,
not actually what it should be, because Pilaf has grown in something. He's grown in desperation,
right.
and that's going to play out. We'll see how that'll play out. We'll see how the fruits of that tree Goku has planted, how they turn out, eh?
Well, that's the point ultimately of that character to exist, right?
Yeah, and then we never hear from him again. Anyways,
Basically, he never comes back into the story once.
well, because that's what, yeah, it
Yeah.
kind of is. So we'll get to that eventually. Point is, his defeat of Pilaf at this point, Goku is not acknowledging. Now, it is important to the overall story, but Goku doesn't think it's important because Goku's on a different path. Let's say
Right.
he
And
also,
that spirit can't overcome Goku with his orientation, right?
yeah,
That he ultimately represents in holding the one star ball, right?
mm-hmm.
So it's something that it's not new, but it's also that it's almost like Goku has that tunnel vision where that's just ancillary information. He's like, my focus right now is very much
Well, it's almost Petersonian, like
on what's right for Upa, right?
do
He's not
something
thinking about himself at all,
do
right?
something to the best of your ability, single mindedly. Let's say something like that,
Well,
right?
it's the selflessness of what he's doing as well, right? He's like, this isn't about me. I don't have time to talk to you guys right now. I'm doing this for somebody else, right? For him to stop and talk to them and explain things is to keep Upa from his father. So he's like,
Yeah, he understands the weight of it.
mm-hmm.
And so the last thing we see before they take off is Upa stares into the puer and they both cry.
Yep.
Significant because that is that externalization of the masculine that is feminine that can, let's say, exude those emotions, those, let's say, unmasculine emotions.
Right. Well, we see also that the spirit of Puer is still there within Upa, whereas it's detached from Yamcha here. And that's sort of
Yeah.
the representations
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
Oolong and Puer, right? So it shows that purity, right?
Right. It shows, yeah, it shows Upa's integration and his also reverence towards Roshi, in Roshi's teaching shows that as well. And he's kind of, like we said, that almost prototypical Goku, except he, no, he's a lot like that actually. And that's why Goku sees a lot in himself and that untainted, uncorrupted version of humanity, right?
Goku gets to work out that situation in the world outside of himself before working it out for himself, right? So it's the most selfless expression of this thing that it can be, right?
Mm-hmm. And so they take off. And Baba tells the crew that someday Goku will save the world. Yamcha then tells Roshi that he would like to enter into his training. But Roshi says that he has too much on his plate already. Bulma intervenes, saying that she would like to visit Yamcha and swim in her new bathing suit at his island. This is enough to easily convince Roshi to train Yamcha, and they all do that anime thing where they fall back because they're astounded. Because Roshi's like, okay, if
And
you're
he
gonna come in
turns
your
beet
bikini,
red,
yeah. He's beat red, and he's like, yep. When can you start? So, so Yamcha does enter Roshi's training.
right?
Now here, a couple things. Obviously, Bulma's the only kind of the only reason that he's able to get the training to begin with, and it's partially because he's not subordinated himself in the proper way. Right? He's previously acted as if the environment, mastering his environment alone, is enough to master himself.
It is extremely fitting here because this is a resolution to Yamcha's story arc, right?
Because now he must, yes.
And now, what could he not have before, right? Whenever we enter back into his story, there's a wedge between Bulma and Yamcha, right? She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. She's like, this doesn't mean that I like you. Like, she's just treating him like that, holding him at arm's length. She's facing away from him, paying attention to the ground instead of interacting with him in this situation, right? And then she hears him say that he wants to enter the tutelage of Roshi, right? That he wants to better himself. And immediately,
And he wants to
she's like, I want
subordinate
to come out there. I will.
and he wants to subordinate himself to a higher ideal. But yes,
Exactly,
yeah.
yeah. She's immediately like, I'm willing to make that sacrifice, right?
Yes. It also, because Bulma is who she is as the archetypal female, she is able to see through Roshi's bullshit and know that he's lying and that he can have another student, right?
Yep.
That also makes her mad. And so both of those things combine to create this almost hell hath no fury
Mhm.
Bulma coming at him quick. And so turns it around. And that's how Yamcha gets to train from the basics.
I think that's
Deliver,
a very agreeable term for Roshi.
yes. And it's is it a corrupt bargain? Not really. I wouldn't say so. It's not nearly as corrupt as some of the things we've seen Roshi do before.
Oh yeah. I mean, the this whole idea though of Bulma accepting this aspect of masculinity so that she can be appreciative of uh the potential hero or the potential, just
Well,
positive
and that being
masculine
the
expression,
archetypal
right?
female that calls forth that which is best in men, right?
Yeah, so it's like a call to reverence
Mhm.
for that spirit.
Yep. I agree. And so, then we finally get to our next set of clips, 14 minutes in.
Yeah.
So, Goku and Upa leave, obviously, and as they ride towards the land of Korin, they play on giant lily pads, and then they keep going.
They just bounce along.
They bounce
They have a
along, having
it's
a
a very like joyous thing that they're doing, right? You would think that
yeah,
they would just be beelining straight there, but as soon as they're in the air, now they're like playing on the way, and it's like a music video all of a
it's
sudden.
really something.
And
And actually, it is a music video. There's a
it's got
song to
interesting
it.
lyrics. It's like it's talking about standing up to even the steepest of mountains and all of these different things. Even if we go astray, we don't lose sight of our dreams and all of this. It's it's interesting that they threw this in on the way to go and revive his father, but I guess it's interesting showing that he's traversing the land not just by the Nimbus, right? So we see that it's like now
Well,
as he's going, he's actually like
I mean,
bouncing
think
along the
yeah.
ground and on the water.
I was gonna say, think about how we've been talking this whole these I guess Red Ribbon and Baba sagas about how Mother Nature herself has uh let's say supported our hero along the way. Is like literally that, right? And then they throw away it at the end, like that whole immersion of it with being with Upa, who is someone who's in harmony with nature, right? All of that has come together for this last like it's almost like in a remember it is it's kind of like remember those chaotic occurrences which were favorable to the hero along the way, because especially with the lyrics you think about, right?
Mhm. I
It's
like that too though that
yeah.
it's showing this right now as he's traveling along, he's incorporating the ground, right? And we see that now that he's traveling with him, it's like he's traveling
Well, in that spirit of
because there
creation, right?
I'm also thinking along the lines of the mapping that we've been talking about throughout the season, right? Where it's like being able to map out a space further than yourself more and more and more and more. And it's one thing to let the Nimbus take you to a specific place, but the places along the way should have importance to you too. And it's sort of this thing about
It's a stop and tell the
connecting and
flowers,
seeing.
right?
Yeah, it's smelling the flowers.
It's
It's
petting
seeing
a cat.
actually seeing the potential along the way and being appreciative of being right.
Right,
And
yeah.
there's a responsibility that comes with that which is being in touch with the places that you're going,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. Yep.
So I like that we're starting to see that in Goku's story.
It's definitely something that has developed. Um, I think with Upa being around.
Yeah, really understanding sort of the other and the stranger being archetypally as heroic or more heroic than you, and like and understanding that much potential is outside of yourself, right?
And so when they arrive, Upa begins to cry at the grave of his father. And Goku reminds him that they are bringing him back to life. Goku calls for Shenron and the sky darkens, sending lightning crashing down. Shenron is called forth, but Upa is too scared to confront him. When Goku says that he'll just make the wish instead, Upa finds the courage and asks Shenron to revive his father. So this is very important because it is that enunciation of Upa's spirit into the world, he has to do his part. Like Goku has brought him this far.
Right. So we saw them playing with Mother Nature on the way here. This is like the positive
Yes.
maternal spirit helping them along the way, but here's the dragon, right? Here is the all of the weight of potentiality coming at you maliciously, and how can you confront it? And so,
Well, how can you turn it into order?
how can
By
yeah,
by speaking magic words, and that is in instantiating your wish into
right.
the world.
And that's also getting calling his name, right?
Yeah,
But like as a spell.
it is a spell. Yeah.
That's you spell his name, right? You call out to him, and that's why there's so much emphasis put on Goku calling his name to come out, right?
Every time they do it, in fact.
Um, it's tied to that being able to speak order from chaos itself.
And this is another thing here too. Goku here inspires Upa, and it's just that last little bit that Upa has to do. He's actually fought in a tournament of fighters, right? He's fought a vampire.
Right.
Upa Vampire Slayer, you guys should call him. And I mean, he's been on this journey to Baba's. He's confronted Tao. He's confronted death, and was defiant in the face of it. Like he's grown a lot. He's come a long way, and so this is like the
And he's
last
shown a
thing.
rebellious spirit as well, right? In
Yeah,
the sense that Goku is like, here's how you can be safe. And he's just like, no, I can't be safe.
yeah. And so here, this is just the last step that Upa has to confront potentiality, chaos itself, and create his own order from it. And so we're gonna see what that is. So Bora climbs out of his grave, and Upa rushes him in tears. Upa tells him that Goku gathered the Dragon Balls to revive him, and Shenron says farewell and turns back into energy. Goku watches the Dragon Balls as they float into the air and keeps his eye on the 4-star ball. At the last second, he jumps up and catches it before it can be scattered with the rest of them. Goku then explains the way that the Dragon Balls work to Upa and Bora. And Bora thanks Goku for everything he's done. Upa tells Bora that Goku had climbed Korin's tower and defeated Tao Pai Pai, and Bora says that Goku is like a child of the gods. Goku says that he needs to leave despite Bora's insistence that he can stay, so that they can show him proper hospitality. He says they want to offer him a feast.
Right.
And Goku says his friends are waiting for him, and actually, it's really funny because in the dub, Bora just goes, okay.
Okay.
And that's it. And so Goku flies away in the Nimbus, with Bora telling Upa that he should be like Goku in spirit and strength. And Upa says that one day he will also climb Korin Tower, just like Goku. He knows that if he trains hard enough, he'll be able to do it someday. So this is like the last we see of Bora and Upa.
Yep. He says, someday I'll see you again. Never seen from again.
Never
Never heard
see.
from. Never seen from.
Well, while that is true, yeah. This is the last we see of it because that story is over. Goku has now done it. He's redeemed the spirit of the father.
He's become a legend in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Where he is the the center pole to look at, right? The best mode of being that he can
And this
envision.
is why this should be the last episode of the Red Ribbon Army arc, which
Yes.
should also be encapsulated with Baba because it's all one. This whole thing is one. Since he goes to look for his grandfather's ball to this episode, that's one arc.
We're ending it with the ball in his hand here now. So that is the conclusion of what he was doing here, right?
And he's achieved his purpose, yeah. And by focusing on an aim worthy and greater than himself, he has been able to do something so miraculous that the rest of the characters don't even know how to explain it. And we're about to get to that in the next set. But this is such an important part, and this is the first time we see the Dragon Balls used to revive someone. And that doesn't, it's not like, oh, death doesn't mean anything, because the collection of the Dragon Balls as we've instantiated is that seeking of unknown wisdom and the use of that wisdom and the logos to revive someone or revive a spirit, right, is to call back that pattern of being that exists. It's not to say that, and I think we've talked about this, the show should not be taken literally. Go ahead.
It's like to say that in spite of the malice of the world coming and taking Upa's father, the most valuable thing to him, Goku is able to do something for him, right? That reinvigorates, that revitalizes the spirit to be the best that he can be, like his father that was already killed by the world, right? And so Goku defeats death in that sense, and that's why he brings him back from death as
Right,
well.
and that's what the hero archetype does, is defeating death. And that's when I was watching the show, this part and the whole Tao Pai Pai thing, that's why we focused on it so much, is because
Yeah,
that's exactly
'cause I
the
didn't want to say
crux of it.
defeats death just yet, but this is
This
actually
is
what it
when he
is.
defeats death,
Yeah,
yeah. Because it's almost, and that's why I said he calls forth that spirit when he revives people, because it's almost um Christ-like in the way that that spirit is carried forth, right?
right.
Not even necessarily with a religious aspect, but the spirit of Christ and how
And
Christ
the
acted,
in the way that the truth that he spoke
or
validated being,
or
right,
let's even
in a
say
sense.
Santa Claus.
Yeah,
Let's even say Santa Claus, right? He calls forth that spirit. If Goku, which according to Team Ford Star, he loves Christmas, so if Goku called forth the spirit and redeemed the spirit of Santa Claus, it would be a similar thing, right? It would be that reverence. Now Santa Claus's spirit across time, right? He's not actually alive. You can kill the
right.
spirit
He's
of
like a
Santa
meta
Claus.
being, right?
Yeah. So, and that's all to say that here, this mechanic of Dragon Ball isn't exactly what it seems to be. Like, the Dragon Balls can be used for anything, but they're only used for certain things, and that's for a reason.
Yeah. So one of the biggest questions that people have about the show when they're thinking about, like, does it even make sense? They're going, why didn't this person just wish for this? Why didn't this person just wish for that? As if the Dragon Balls are literally something that they say to the letter, right? Which is you could just have anything. Which is to say, oh, someone who actually got what they wanted would want whatever mundane thing I came up with, right? It's like, well, why didn't they just have this approach instead? And it's like, no, people aren't just oriented towards winning.
And
They're
not only
oriented towards whatever completes them or whatever completes their story or
m-
ties them into their mode of being,
I was
right?
going to say, not only that, but it's the the chaos that is represented by Shenron, right? Meeting the wisdom that it takes to get there. So the wisdom that Goku was imparted, the mapping that he learned, the malice that he understood, right? That stuff is what he learned, is what redeems the father. So that is the wish that is fulfilled.
Right.
Each
That
of
is
the
the order.
wishes, that has to be it, right? Each of the wishes has that exact thing.
Right.
And we'll get into that as we get to the next wish, which is going to be wild.
Oh boy, it's gonna be wild.
Right. So, not to get too far ahead, but this is the last we see of our American Indian pair. I'll miss them. They're quite good characters.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the characters that have been brought back into the newer content, and I'm like, where's the OGs?
Not
Where are the good
no OG.
characters?
Yeah, well, I mean, Dragon Ball has some real hits with some of these side characters.
Oh
No
yeah,
joke. And the way that they're handled is so well done in this part of the show. So let's go ahead and continue. So Goku. Wait, one thing I want to mention before is that Bora saying that Goku is like a child of the gods.
of course.
So we were just talking about how it's Christ-like. It's kind of Christ-like, and then in that way that Christ is also an instantiation of the archetypal hero, which redeems. And so Goku here redeems, and being the um not predecessor, the successor to that godly spirit, right, is something that he's acknowledging in Goku.
So, Jung posits that Christ is the self archetype representation completely, right? That Christ is the archetype of the self. And that's a hard thing to sort of completely wrap your head around. It's to say you across all of time is a being, and what that being wants the most, right? It's the archetype of the self. It's sort of all of your potentiality, in an expression of pure, how would you say, almost like a pure wisdom, right? So it's but also the archetype. It goes down to the sense of like what is at the very center of your being, right? And so Christ is that center, right? And that's why he's like hung up on the axis mundi or whatever. It's that center of being, right? So the self is the sort of the axis mundi of the psyche. And so the self
Well,
archetype,
everyone matters to themselves,
right?
right?
So that is starting to show up as this representation in Goku. But I don't think that the self archetype is that simple. So you're not just born the self archetype or something like that. That's more of the hero, right? But it becomes more of the self the more you start seeing those really fundamental representations like with Christ, where it's deeply, deeply sort of, oh, these are golden rule type things about being that we sometimes can take for granted. But
Well, we'll get there with Goku.
and that's how it is with Superman, who
Yeah.
is also child of the gods, right?
Child of
He's
gods, yeah.
and that's
Well, Goku is actually the same. He is a child of gods.
right. Or you could say a child of the world, right? Doesn't have his earthly parents, right? So he's everyone.
Right. I think child of the gods and child of the world both describe Goku.
Yeah.
But
And
we
that's that
we
above
can't
below
I
dichotomy.
don't want to
But
get too into the outer space yet. So
right, but that we know that's coming. But
we
it's
do. It's
but that's why we
actually
see that. So that's
closer
an
than we
aspect
think.
of him actually being a child of the god. So I really like that wisdom that you see
Well,
this
it's
early, right?
also to say that this was planned. Like it's planned. I don't know if people say it's not
You
planned.
can't deny that.
Yeah, it's said right here's the foreshadowing is everywhere. It's like, oh, it's just
They don't even
coincidence.
acknowledge it for this entire
It's
series.
just coincidence. Anyways, so I guess last thing here is Upa wanting to be as strong as Goku, which is admirable, and it just shows how Goku has imparted his inspiration on, or not imparted his inspiration, how Goku's spirit has inspired Upa's to continue that betterment. And Bora says to live in spirit and strength, and Goku's spirit and strength,
Right.
which is a good way, a good compliment to Goku from Bora. I mean, after all, Goku just did save his life, so a little gratitude goes a long way.
But that is some wisdom, right?
It is, yeah. And so we leave the land of Korin for now, and we go back to Goku running along the mountaintops on his way back to Baba's tower. Before hopping on the Nimbus, and we see a little bit of his jovial nature again, now that he's not on a time crunch as well, right? When Goku arrives back at Baba's palace, he tells everyone about reviving Bora, and Roshi tells him it was a very selfless thing that he did. Goku immediately realizes that he needs to pee, and he goes to pee off the side, and Baba doesn't like that very much. Um, Bulma asks Goku if he's going to search for his grandpa's ball again, but Goku reveals that he already has it, pulling the stone out of his chest pocket.
I guess that's something we're gonna need to talk about.
We will, yeah. He states that he wants to train for the next Tenkaichi Budokai, and Yamcha excitedly tells Goku that Roshi has agreed to teach him. Goku then exclaims that they will be able to train together and it'll be a lot of fun. But Roshi interjects, telling Goku that the next phase of his training will have to be out in the world, outside of his known borders, let's say. He needs to go further into the unknown. And so he needs to go out into the world so that he can exceed his master. Roshi tells Goku that he is limitless in his potential and that there may always be something greater than himself. This is a lesson he tried to impart with the first Tenkaichi Budokai.
Say
But
uncle.
we see it again. Mm-hmm. Goku says he doesn't understand what that means, but sounds like fun. So he decides to go train. And when he calls for the Nimbus, Roshi stops him, telling them that his training will require him to journey without the Nimbus. And this is another interesting thing because, well, we'll get to it in a second. Let me finish this off real quick. Goku then shrugs off this surprise and casually accepts the terms with, well, whatever, and sprints off into the distance. So the reason why he can't travel with the Nimbus,
Mm.
it's putting those barriers. It's not allowing a person to be complacent with where they are. I think a good analogy would be someone who's striving to be a master chess player, who's playing people that are middling in skill. So what would that person do if that's all they had to play with? How would they get better? But allow the other person to get an advantage on them. Let's say put a handicap on themselves. And so that's what Goku's done here. He's he's mastered a lot of things already. And so he needs kind of a handicap that will put him in a place he hasn't been in a while. He's had the Nimbus for quite a bit, right? He got it back from Muscle Tower. Like he didn't have to travel anywhere without it, besides in the plane with the robot.
Right. Well, this is setting Goku up on what's essentially more of a pilgrimage, right? So now he has to be encountering chaos for a long period of time, right? And be heading, well, wherever the road takes him, right?
Well, that's the other thing is that he has no aim, and so if he was to travel the world on the Nimbus, he would miss a lot because of his elevated gaze. So now he has to lower his gaze down to the world so that he can pay attention to things that would call forth to him.
Right. So we had talked about how he's a child of the world in a sense. And so now he needs to know the world.
Yeah.
And
And
this
now
is
he needs to know the
necessary
world.
for him to be able to grow because he
For
can't be
anyone to grow, because like you said, the archetype of the self.
right.
Goku's
This
gonna
is the
grow
self.
into
This
that,
is
yeah.
your experience as well, right? That's what the self is fundamentally is that it's the limit story, right? That's why it's about everyone. And that's why it's about defeating death. But the so with Goku,
Well, that's the ultimate. Anyways, go on.
so yeah, so with Goku being that it's understanding that a person needs to be able to let go of being in control of what their aim is and let the world teach them so that they can
Become
humbly
open to
learn.
the world, yeah.
Yeah, so that they can humbly learn a better way to orient themselves. And that can only come with experience. There's a limit to what a single master can teach you, always, right? Because nobody can know all of potentiality because of time.
Yep. And even that passed down wisdom isn't gonna encapsulate everything. But the experiences journeyed that Goku's about to have um will kind of round out that hole that Goku needs.
Right. And what did Baba say earlier in this episode? But he's going to save the world, right?
Yeah. Sooner than you think. So, right. I think that brings us neatly to the end as
Well, I want to
Goku.
point out
Oh,
Goku also needing to pee
oh.
whenever he gets told that what he did was selfless, right? It's like he has no sense of himself and he has to be reminded you're being extremely selfless and he becomes aware of his needs and he goes, "Oh, I have to reveal myself." Right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
he does whenever he pees and he's been doing this whole time is he reveals himself whenever he becomes aware of himself, right? And so it's like he was so selfless in what he did that it was like a pure self-sacrificial type of thing. He eliminated himself from the equation and achieved the ultimate good for somebody other than himself, right? And so it's like he gets grounded by the blind father, right? Who points out himself. He points out like, "Oh, you're being pretty selfless right now." You know what I
And then
mean?
he pees, yeah.
And then he
Yeah.
then he has to reveal himself again, and then it's sort of like his he becomes not a joke, but it's like he makes a joke out of himself so that he immediately lowers himself, right?
Yes. And that's to say it's the appropriate it's the appropriate reaction to feel self-conscious or to regain self-consciousness after committing an act like Goku has.
Right.
Um and it would be pointed out by the ancestral father, so or the ancestral spirit of the father.
But I
Yeah.
do want to tie that into sort of that Buddhist notion, which is like finding nirvana is letting go of the self. It's like, and
And
so
that's what Goku's done, right? He's let go of the self such that he was able to do this great
right, and
task.
that's what the Buddha brings back, right? They're like, "Are you a god now?" Right? He's like, "He's a child of the gods." And they say, "Are you a god now?" And he says, "No, I'm awake."
Yeah.
And it's like Goku's awake,
Yes.
and he has to be
And now he's
now he has to
awake.
be reminded of himself because he can
Yeah.
be purely selfless.
Well, he was on the path of meaning, and
Right,
it's an engrossing path. I mean, people know that.
pure meaning.
Well, I mean, think about this. All right, you've had a meaningful conversation with someone, and when you're in that moment, it goes by quickly, and you lose track of yourself, right?
Right,
And so that's what Goku has done here since he stared into his grandfather's ball after Bora died. I would say is when he really let go of that. Because that was his goal, was to get that. He could have just walked away right then.
right. The spirit of his father
Called forth the
called
best.
forth the
Yeah.
best path for him to take across time. Right, this is the best path you could possibly be taking right now, and he was motivated by it, and it took him, and he didn't know where he was going to go. He just knew that he was going to make it the
And
way that it
so
was
the
going to end up.
answer
Right.
is when the spirit of the father is destroyed by the let's say the spirit of the benevolent father, the image of that is destroyed by the malevolence in the world. The path forward is to redeem that spirit.
Yes.
That is what Goku has, and that's what this one is about. Ooh.
Ooh.
And so that's what this episode's about.
Pretty much. Just about, it's pretty important to revere and respect your father, as Roshi had said.
So all you watching, please revere and respect your fathers. I think it's a good one for that, yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that is a nice little cap on this season.
Definitely. Well, if you guys like what you heard, please subscribe. Please like. We upload Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Give us a subscribe. I'm your host on the left owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and this was Get the Mic, episode 79. 78.
78.
78. The Eternal Dragon Rises. Have a good night, everyone.
Violent electrical storm erupted in the skies of the planet I was on.